Hey guys, obviously, this face cam, new video style type thing. The reason I've been meaning to do this for a while, the reason I'm doing this to quickly explain is because I'm a game developer, I'm doing things like it's planning my wedding. There's a lot of busy parts of my life right now. And so because of that, I don't really have time to kind of do all the beat. Like recording the video isn't bad, coming up with the idea isn't bad, and even like scripting isn't bad. It's just the b-roll editing stuff that can be very egregious. So I'm like, if you can add face cam, at least it can make the editing aspect of this significantly easier. I don't even know if the green screen, this took so long. Pick it up, by the way, like the whole sellotaping. These are sellotaped up and I have to take them down. So what's today's video about? Well, I was in an Uber visiting my fiance, and then the Uber driver's playing the radio, right? And on the radio, I think it was like London British radio or something along those lines. It was something along those lines. I'll have it up on screen. It'll pop up. See, they'll be editing, right? It was like Pride in Britain is at an all-time low.
Oh my God, bro, nobody cares.
They were like, yeah, man, like this is really bad. Like, is this even warranted? And there was just this kind of big discourse. And so people were calling in. And fuck that, I actually nearly called in, right? But I'll get to that part of the story and I'll give you some of my thoughts. So like they're talking about this thing and people are calling in and they're like, yeah, obviously the empire did some bad things, but I feel like it's incumbent on our school systems to, teach the nuances and, the great things the empire did and this, that, and the third. And let's explore the nuances of the British Empire so we don't just doom and gloom it, and like British history and British identity. But there are no nuances, right? I believe it was natives. So Race and Class in the Ruins of Empire by Keller. He said this, and it's been proven time after time that when you strip British identity away from the empire, right? And I don't think you can strip it away for colonialism, because like the foundations of the identity were that it was the imperial rule, it was the colonialism, right? And so when you build an identity constructed around that, like you can't run away from that. And that's what it was built on. It's why oftentimes we talk about destruction and rebuilding to destroy, like it's like they get childish, like Dragon Ball, right? With Beerus, right? Like, creation, before creation must come destruction, um and so if the foundations are like broken, right? If the foundations aren't strong, a lot of the time it means you need to start from scratch and rebuild your foundations. If I build a house out of straw, like from the bottom, but then I start like building it out of woods like shortly after, you still built the bottom out of straws. You can't run away from what you built it, what the identity was built on. Like something I was brought up was like, oh yeah, like there's things to be proud of, like there's British people in the Olympics and all this, and it's like we can't take the accomplishments of one or two people and try to kind of use that to reframe British identity. You cannot divorce British identity from colonialism. You cannot divorce British identity from racism. You can't divorce British identity from slavery, right? You can't, right? Westminster, literally at Westminster, there's a massive statue of Winston Churchill, right? And he was notoriously racist, and we could talk, oh, he was a great surveyor and this, that, and the third. Regardless, right? I'm not going to get into that, but regardless, right? You can't divorce him from that, right? That is always a part of his history. And when you have that little young boy, right? That little young white British boy, and he's looking up at Winston Churchill, and they're like, yeah, man, he was really cool. He was a hero. And you're electing him up, and you're propping these people up without the critical understanding, right? They're gonna, not only are they taking on that inspiration, they're taking on all of those supplemental racist colonial values, right? And this is kind of the messy part, right? And it's requiring of a very honest conversation about not only what British identity was and what it's always been, but like an honest conversation about some of the people that we kind of hold up as like great leaders and great people to begin with, right? That's inherently what it's kind of requiring of. But it feels like Britain is still avoidant of having that conversation. And, obviously we recently had the stuff going on with the race riots and what have you. And, immigration issues have always been a bit of an undercurring issue in terms of exposing Britain's racism, right? Because again, a lot of it is a lot more subtle, so to speak. I think they've been very overt in a lot of ways. I'm not going to get into here. They're talking about how the youth specifically aren't, they have an all-time low pride in Britain, right? And I think it's a great thing. I think it's great that young people are being educated and they're understanding the nuances of history and recognizing that. And I think stuff like that does open the door for honest conversations to be had about what the identity is. In fact, and this is kind of a common thing, right? And he's even speaking to online spaces because it's very easy, I think, diasporas, what have you, be like, oh yeah, at least we have universal healthcare, like, I don't know, like all that stuff, right? And it's like, a lot of people here don't like it, I think I saw a tweet, it was about the Brazilian Miku stuff, right? Like Brazil, oh gosh, man. But like, the idea was, regardless of what your thoughts are on the Russian government, right? It would be, you can't like look at the citizens there and be like, yeah, man, they all must just agree with the government, because I'm sure just as many Britons don't like love the Tories, right, or love Parliament or love the government, what have you, right? I'm sure a lot of Americans, don't love, because I recognize I have like a strong American audience. Not gonna say a lie, right? A lot of Americans don't like the government. A lot of Americans don't like the president, Kamala included, and so it creates that interesting dynamic, right? Like sometimes I get comments going like, you're not British, you're not Black British, you'll never be British, right? And it's like, you're right. Like, I do think that, right? But similarly, given the Commonwealth and, Windrush generation and what have you, legally, I am considered British, right? But obviously that's not what British identity truly means. Again, if you divorce British identity from colonialism and the empire and what have you, all you have is whiteness, effectively, right? The royal family are the perfect example, right? I gotta be careful because my faith is in this video. You know how we talk about the president as a puppet for the people, effectively? They are a spokesperson. They have some power, but they don't have all the power. You know what I mean? The Queen and the royal family, or I guess the king now. And I hope no one saw the video I uploaded. Right. Sorry about that. So like again, like I don't know. So I'm thinking about the Queen. Because the royal family are supposed to be representative of, not the utopian British family, but like a kind of representative of, British identity, British values, what have you. They are effectively the example in which we are supposed to follow. If you notice, man, and not getting into all the stuff with men and what have you, no Black people. It's never going to be a Black king. There's never going to be a Black queen. And I'm not saying that as someone that is infatuated with monarchy. Very far from it. But it's just not going to happen because that is not what British identity is about. It's not what it's founded on or conceived upon, right? There's a reason UKIP, Tony Blair and what have you were able to get away with the things that they did. There's a reason, right? They could run a Keep Britain White campaign, right? And that actually got some tractors, right? There's a reason, Brexit. Brexit was built on the greatness of the British Empire. We need to take Britain back. And we have to ask those questions back to what? Even when on this podcast, right? Or this radio show, my bad. The radio show, when they're talking and they're like, yeah, how can we reframe this? Like, reframe what? You're racist. Like they don't like you because you're racist. They don't like you because you were imperialists, right? What are you trying to reframe? What narrative are you trying to reclaim even? This is what the identity was built on. And instead of accepting that and having an honest conversation about that, it feels a lot more like British identity is kind of, we're trying to not necessarily sweep it under the rug. I'm going to say, just trying to sweep it under the rug and go, this doesn't feel that great. How do we feel better? Which isn't honest. It's not genuine. And that's, I think, part of the frustration, it's seeing that. And obviously, like, this ties into my story where I was in the Uber and I was like, I might actually call into the show. And so I called in, and the lady picked up and says, what do you want to say? Doesn't say hi, doesn't say, she says, what do you want to say? I said, oh. And I was like, okay. I'm like, okay. And I made my point. Basically, I said a lot of the similar things that I just said now, right? And they said, okay, well, where are you from? And I said, okay, like London. It's like, well, but where are you from? And I said, okay, but like Bermondsey, like Lewisham. Okay, but where are you from? And it's like, Bermondsey, I don't know what to tell you. I was born here, right? And eventually she got the message and she didn't pry any further and put me on hold. Then I hung up because I was like, one, I'm in an Uber, and two, that didn't sit well with my spirit. But it's interesting. First of all, I think it's interesting that there is that. It makes sense, but there is that filtering process where it's like, hey, man, let's make sure we know what you're gonna say before we throw you on our show, right? But two, just that this person was asking that question to begin with, which to me feeds into those same things. You know, it feeds into a lot of those same narratives, and that's, I think, the big frustration. The big frustration is, okay, you have built this identity around the things you've built it around, and instead of wanting to accept that, instead of being honest about that, you would much rather masquerade around it. You'd much rather try to kind of like, how do we, leave an impression on the youth that, makes them look at British identity more favorably, and it sounds a lot less like honesty and a lot more like PR, right? Like, what is this really about? And that's, I think, something that really began to kind of weigh in on me. Just, what is all of this really and truly about? People in Britain, people in the UK, what have you, we are becoming more and more jaded to the idea of British identity, patriotism, what have you, right? And I think that's great. Not where we need to be, but I think that's a good thing. And that's a sign that people are more willing to have honest conversations about British. Because again, look at horrible histories, right? You got horrible history. Like, there's been a real big attempt to kind of rosy up and make jovial the atrocities of British history, right? It's such a big part. And now people are getting a bit more clued up. Right. And obviously Gen Z, we're not going to inherently respect these things. I just think there's a lot of work to be done. And while I'm happy and I'm grateful to the fact that, we are reaching a point where it's becoming more and more consensus, specifically young people. Revolution is in the hands of the young, as Huey P. Newton said. I'm grateful that there is that conversation being had. Equally so, it worries me that discussions are being had publicly, and we are comfortable having these conversations publicly, going, okay, but how do we make ourselves look better? Like, to me, that doesn't scream reflection. It doesn't scream honesty or sincerity. It screams, ooh, they're kind of catching on. Do you know what I mean? Yo, these men are kind of like, do you know what I mean? And I think that's the scarier for. If you guys enjoyed this kind of video, it's easier for me to make this sort of stuff. I'll get a trim eventually. Let's see how many of these I can churn out without a trim before I start feeling insecure. But thank you guys so much for your time. If you want to support me, you can support me on Patreon or Ko-Fi. I'm a Black British game developer working on a Black British game called Nixie. It's set in Lewisham. It's about a young woman called Fiona Sol trying to kind of she's very reclusive, and she's learning to open up and be honest about who she is. And it's about found family and communication and almost the demonization of African spirituality. It's very interesting stuff. It's inspired by The World Ends With You, The Boondocks, all this stuff. We also have the free Huey FOODBANK, which I do bi-monthly. Very cool stuff. And also, you'd be supporting me, on this channel, making videos like this. So if you enjoyed this video, if you want to see more stuff, if you're interested, let me know, because I would like to make more stuff. Okay. Thank you guys so much for your time. Take care. I won't eat you guys too much. Take care. Peace. Bye-bye.